Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolu. The 11-day conflict between Israel and Hamas, which killed nearly 250 people, mostly Palestinians, has ended for now. At 2 a.m. local time, a ceasefire came into effect and seems to be holding, with airstrikes and rocket fire silent. The violence between the two sides had seen tit-for-tat attacks, the worst since 2014. Well, Israel accepted the Egyptian initiative for a ceasefire without preconditions, and the main Palestinian groups in Gaza also confirmed the truce. Egyptian state TV reported that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has dispatched 2 delegations to Israel and Palestine to monitor the ceasefire and work out the fine print. And there were scenes of celebration in Gaza as people took to the streets.
Thank God, everything is good, and the people have returned to their work. This is a victory from God. May God grant us victory over the Jews.
Life will return, because this is not the first war, and it will not be the last war. Normal life will return as you see people have woken up. It is true that the heart is in pain. There are disasters. There are families wiped entirely from the civil registry, and this is something that saddens us. But this is our fate in this land, to be patient.
Well, to get a more balanced view of that breakthrough ceasefire, I'm joined now by the respected Middle East analyst, Dr. Saul Zadka. Great to see you, Dr. Saul, especially on a day like this. Barely a week ago, we were talking about the increasing tensions between the two sides. As we saw there have been celebrations in Gaza as people flocked to the streets to claim some kind of victory out of all this. And that's really what political leaders are trying to say, isn't it? I mean, they're trying to sell their accomplishments and their achievements from this conflict.
Celebrations in Gaza, riots in Jerusalem as we speak, the flashpoint where everything began 11 days ago. And the question, of course, is who won? If you ask the Israeli government, they will tell you, we did. If you ask Hamas and the other jihadi organizations in Gaza, they will tell you, we won. If you ask me, I will tell you, nobody won. There are only losers in that round of hostilities, as it happened back in 2014. Why am I saying that? Because each side cannot really pride itself of many achievements. On the Israeli side, for example, yes, of course, they inflicted heavy blows on Hamas military infrastructure, including the jewel of the crown, the so-called metro, in which the Israelis destroyed about 100 kilometers of combat tunnels. And of course, the Iron Dome defense system intercepted about 90% of all the rockets that were fired into Israel. And Israel did not lose political support, not in America, not in the European Union, and also not in the Arab world. The Arab world has a disdain towards Hamas. However, if you ask Hamas, they will definitely be able to say that they managed to put the Palestinian issue back on the international agenda. They managed to monopolize Jerusalem. They sidelined the Palestinian Authority. They involved the Israeli Arabs in the mixed towns in the conflict. They also won the narrative in the social media. So in many respects, Hamas has good reasons to celebrate. However, if this war is a football match, I would tell you it ended in a draw with no extra time like last time and with no penalty shootout.
Well, that's a very interesting analogy that I think a lot of people can probably relate to. But importantly and tellingly, Dr. Zadka, both sides have suggested that this is a truce and not necessarily a ceasefire. What can make this cessation of hostilities permanent so that you don't have a return to the violence and there isn't a recurrence of this?
The only way to do it, if at all it's possible, as we speak, I'm sure Hamas started to rearm itself in its effort to recover its military might, and the Israelis are looking into how they can learn lessons from this round of hostilities. But the only way to maintain the situation of quiet, or maybe to upgrade the truce into a permanent, sustainable ceasefire, is to involve other players in the Gaza crisis with a view of trying to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is not something that I can see on the horizon. It's not waiting around the corner. But the good old Egypt, which is very respected by both sides, although the Egyptians have a disdain towards Hamas, being an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is outlawed in Egypt. If we see a situation in which many Arab countries and many Western countries are involved in Gaza and making sure that hostilities would not be so easy to start, we may see the beginning of the road. At the same time, the Palestinian Authority, which has been so weakened by those 11 days, should be enhanced and encouraged, and maybe being able to come to the negotiation table with Israel, because so far the Israelis were playing into the hands of Hamas, and quite deliberately so, because with Hamas there is no chance of political concessions, as Hamas does not recognize Israel. Hamas is committed to the destruction of Israel. So it was quite convenient for the Israeli present leadership to deal with Hamas every now and then, not to deal with the Palestinian Authority, to whom it would have to make concession in order to reach some kind of settlement between both sides.
But looking forward, Dr. Zadka, President Biden has said that this is an opportunity for progress. Many have been calling for the blockade on Gaza, for instance, to be lifted so that lives there can be released in a way. What compromises can be made by both sides in order for peace to reign?
President Biden was dragged into this conflict against his own wishes. He burned his fingers in the Israeli-Arab conflict when he was the deputy president, the vice president of Obama, and he did not really want to deal with the Middle East as he had too many other issues on his plate. But now that he is involved, he will try maybe to strike a deal with other Arab countries in the region in order maybe to ease the life of the people in Gaza. However, there are other voices which claim that Israel was quite lenient towards the Palestinians by allowing the Qatari money to the tune of $30 million every month to get into Gaza via Tel Aviv airport. So Hamas could have used it not only to maybe solve the issues of poverty in Gaza, but also to enhance its own military might. And Israel was also criticized by the right wing in the country for allowing cement into Gaza, for allowing electricity supply into Gaza. So the Israelis are not at the moment in the mood of making any concessions. However, since I predict that the first violation of this truce would be maybe within weeks, not necessarily years, it will be quite foolish on the West to leave Gaza outside its political agenda. And that's why some kind of accommodation, which be more than just a ceasefire, should be found. On the other hand, the Palestinian Authority, which has been eclipsed by Hamas during that crisis, should be encouraged to come to the negotiation table and deal once and for all with Israel for an interim arrangement which will calm things down, not only in Gaza, but also in Jerusalem.
Very interesting analysis there. And traditionally, Dr. Zadka, assuming this moves forward towards a negotiated settlement, the pattern has been that Hamas does the fighting, then hands over to the Palestinian Authority to do the negotiating. Is that what is likely to happen now, or does there now need to be a united Palestinian voice that will speak out forcefully and persuasively on the issues that matter to all Palestinians? Because, as you said, the Palestinian Authority appears to have been sidetracked, and people see Hamas as their defender in Gaza.
And Hamas itself regards itself as the true representative of the Palestinians, because there is a consensus within the Palestinian community that the PA is corrupt and incompetent. The Palestinian Authority has not been elected for the last 15 years. Actually, one can see really the dispute between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority as the main reason behind the war that has been initiated by Hamas. Initially, Israel was only a secondary player here. And actually, we are talking about two entities that are now going through a political vacuum. If the Palestinians did not have an election for the last 15 years, Israel had inconclusive 4 elections in the last 2 years. The Israeli prime minister is actually a lame duck. He leads a government in transition. The country may be going into another 5th election within 2.5 years. We are talking actually between two communities at war with each other without having solid leadership. And that's why my outlook is very pessimistic.
Okay, and Dr. Zadka, there is talk of the actions of both Hamas and Israel being looked at by the International Criminal Court for war crimes. The ICC said to be gathering evidence on what both sides did in those 11 days. What do you make of that?
And the ICC also said a couple of days ago that whatever is happening in the last 11 days would be also a basis for looking into the possibility that both sides are committing acts of criminality. The Israelis were outraged when the ICC first mentioned the possibility of investigating some of its politicians and military men in order to find out whether or not criminal acts were committed during the previous round of hostilities 6-7 years ago. And the Americans, as well as the British, condemn such a decision. So I think eventually it would come to nothing.
Okay, and Dr. Zadka, just we've got literally 30 seconds before we have to end the chat. Give us your final assessment going forward in 20 seconds.
Much depends on whether or not this truce would hold. I think it would not. Why? Because in Gaza, we are not talking only about Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. We are talking also about 12 other jihadi organizations. We did not talk about the elephant in the room. And this elephant speaks Farsi, Persian. Iran was quite behind part of what Hamas was doing in the last 7 years or so. So what I can see in the future is both sides are licking their wounds, trying to recover for what was happening during that particular war, and looking for a way in which the ceasefire would hold for at least a few more years.
Dr. Zadka, I want to thank you very much indeed for your analysis. You're watching the Arise interview, plenty more still ahead, including a scandal that's causing waves 25 years on as Prince William launches a scathing attack on the BBC over an interview with his mother, Princess Diana. Stay with us.